Welcome to Everything Co-op, bringing you information on how cooperatives can help improve your quality of life. This show is being sponsored by the National Co-op Bank, NCB. The NCB is dedicated to strengthening communities nationwide for the delivery of banking and financial services for the nation's cooperatives, their members, and other socially responsible organizations. For more information on the power of community ownership, visit ncb.coop. That's ncb.coop. Now stay tuned for your host, Vernon Oakes.
Good morning. Welcome to Everything Cooperative. It's a beautiful day here in Washington, D.C., and we have on the line with us this morning Jamila Medley. Good morning, Jamila.
Good morning.
So let people know a little bit about you. When we first met, the first time you were on this program, you were with the Philadelphia Area Cooperative Alliance, but now you are stewarding the collective Courage Fund. So first, let's talk about where you grew up and got your education and all of that, and then we'll move into how did you get involved in co-ops. So first, where did you grow up and go to school?
Yeah, so go Brooklyn. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, in the East New York neighborhood. I lived there through high school. I went to my church's school. My church organized and built a school, an elementary school. So I attended that school. And then in middle school and high school, I attended a Brooklyn Friends School, a private Quaker independent school in downtown Brooklyn.
Okay.
And then, I went off to college and got degrees and things. So.
What'd you get your degree in?
My bachelor's comes from Connecticut College, where I majored in urban studies. And I got a graduate degree in organizational dynamics from the University of Pennsylvania.
So where do you live now?
I live in Philadelphia.
Okay. So the question is, how did you get involved in co-ops? What did you learn about co-ops?
Well, I think, as is common for most of us, we have some kind of experiences in our formative years that introduce us to cooperation. And for me, it kind of does go back to growing up in the Black church. I grew up in, the 80s and 90s in a neighborhood of Brooklyn, New York that was working class and poor, was definitely suffering from the crack epidemic and disinvestment, who had transitioned during the period in the 60s and 50s from white flight into a majority Black Latinx kind of community. And so many of my peers, many of the folks that I grew up with, it was not an easy place to grow up in. But my church, St. Paul's Community Baptist Church, they were movement organizers. They leveraged the power of the community to support affordable housing projects, working with the city and state directly to bring affordable housing through home ownership into our communities. They participated in buying up the block, right? So the storefronts and properties around the church were owned by the store, by the church, and many of the businesses that came into being were being led by community members, right? Folks from inside of our community, not outside of it. And so for me, when I kind of got into co-ops, I had to remember that this is not new. I know what organizing work looks like. I know what it looks like when particularly Black communities come together to fight and create self-determining economies for themselves. My formal introduction to cooperatives, as we understand the business model, however, happened around 2012 when I became the membership coordinator of Mariposa Food Co-op in West Philadelphia. And at that time, I also started volunteering with the Philadelphia Area Cooperative Alliance and served on its governance committee as well, while we were also trying to organize the cooperatives in our ecosystem and throughout our region. To imagine what would happen, right, if we were able to bring our power together, our collective power together, and really strengthen a cooperative economy for our communities.
So Maricopa Food Co-op, you got a job there? Is that what you did?
Yeah. So I graduated from grad school, and I was like, well, what am I going to do now? And a colleague was like, hey, the food co-op is hiring. Would you be interested in this position? And it was for membership coordinator, right? So we're staying in touch with member owners, trying to bring in new people to the cooperative, supporting cooperative education and outreach efforts in the community. So I did that role there for a couple of years before transitioning into co-management structure. So I served as a co-manager of the stores, providing internal strategic support for the co-op as it was kind of navigating a new growth cycle.
Okay. So you had not worked in co-ops, you had not studied co-ops in school, and somebody said they're hiring over at the food co-op. You went and you got the job. So you started learning about co-ops and realized this is what we were doing in Brooklyn. Didn't call it co-ops,
Ta-da!
but yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, and that was 2012?
Yeah.
So tell me what a food co-op is. This is for the audience. What is the food co-op?
So the kind of food co-op that I'm talking about is the coming together of an association of people, right, to democratically own and control an enterprise. The co-op, right, is both this association of people and the enterprise that they formed to meet some need. And in the case of a food cooperative, in this instance, I'm talking about a grocery store. So it is a community-owned and controlled grocery store. Mariposa Food Co-op emerges from the early 70s new economy efforts that were happening, where people were really thinking about how do we take control of our food systems and organize together to bring ourselves the kinds of access to food that we want and we need. It's one of the remaining kind of like cooperatives from that era that still has a lot of that ethos to how they govern and do their work.
Okay. So was this mainly white people in the food co-op?
Yes, it was.
Okay.
It's an interesting transition because historically the neighborhood in West Philadelphia where the grocery store is located is traditionally an African-American community. It is also runs right up against the University of Pennsylvania's campus, right?
Okay.
So over the last 30, 40 years or so, we've seen like lots of shifts in the demographics and the character of the community. And the food co-op was actually for 40 years closed to the public. It was only open to member owners. So if you were a member owner, you made your equity investment, you agreed to be a member owner, you were the only people who could shop at that co-op. And around 2009 or so, folks within the cooperative decided that it would be a good opportunity for the co-op and for the community if it worked on an expansion project. And it did that, and in 2012 became open to the public for the first time. And so this is where we begin to really see how a culturally, historically white cooperative really is going to kind of start to grapple with the realities of its neighbors and the community that it has been in. Yeah, that's a whole other kind of conversation.
Well, it was an interesting conversation, and
yeah.
I've had Dr. Jessica Gordon-Emhart on the show several times. And she was saying that when she first started doing research about co-ops, she was told that it was only white people, hippie type folks that were in the co-ops, and that was around the food co-ops and big barrels and bulk food, on the sidewalk and whatever. And it was blacks were not in it. And she said the more research she did, the more she found out, yeah, we did that. Okay, or we did. It turned out in Bluefield, West Virginia, where I grew up at Bluefield State College, they had a co-op in the student union, if you will. And she just found all kinds of co-ops and blacks very much in the co-op space. Okay, so you went from Maricopa over to the Philadelphia Area Cooperative Alliance?
Yeah, I sure did. Well, because I was coming into Mariposa not knowing anything about cooperatives, maybe about 4 months into my tenure there, the Philadelphia Area Cooperative Alliance, also known as PACA, it was like this very fledgling group of people who were staff members and member owners of different kinds of cooperatives throughout Philadelphia. So housing co-ops, the food co-ops, the energy co-op, credit unions, all at the table to really start imagining what this organization could be. So I decided that this might be a good place for me to learn about co-ops, right? For how I can begin to be able to talk about cooperatives from an educated perspective when I'm engaging with the membership and or potential members for Mariposa. And as I kind of learned more and more and more, I just fell in love. I was like, oh my goodness, this is the work that I want to do. I had spent a lot of time working in nonprofit organizations. And what I really valued about cooperatives was the opportunity to support people in their own self-determination.
Wait, can you say that again?
To support people in organizing and realizing their own self-determination, right? And how could I be available to help people do the things that they know how to do to take care of themselves and each other? And I really believed that that was a powerful thing to do. So I stayed with PACA. I was elected to their first board of directors when it was formalized and became a nonprofit organization. And a few years after that, I landed in the executive director role for PACA.
Landed in the landed. You worked your way into it and you're smart and you got things done. Okay. All right, I got it. Landed. Okay. So your history is similar in that growing up in informal education, you were not taught about co-ops. In your environment, in your world, cooperation was happening in the church.
Right.
And the church is a good example of cooperation in the black church. We put in, let's say 10%, put in a little bit, and look at all that people can get accomplished through education and food and clothing and housing. Can just get a lot accomplished. Okay, so where did you go from PACA?
So I'll say that while I was involved with PACA, I also started kind of developing a relationship with Columinate. Columinate, the consulting cooperative. And through Columinate, I was invited to attend my first up-and-coming conference, which is a conference for startup food cooperatives throughout the United States. And so I think I went to that co-op for the first time in 2017, kind of right around the time when I had become executive director for PACA. And so that space was kind of like my first introduction to how food co-ops were organizing from the ground up as startups, right? Rather than working in well-established cooperatives, which were present in Philadelphia. And there were some startups here. So they were also going to this conference as well. And over the years, I kept going back to the up-and-coming conference. And Vernon, you've been to that conference several times, and somehow it just kept getting blacker and blacker. And I was just like, what is happening here? And one year I got there. This is a conference of 300 people, right? 400 people. Mm-hmm. And I remember my first time, I was looking for black and brown faces, and we were few, very, very, very few. By the next year, we were a few dozen. And we organized and said to the conference organizers, hey, can we get a room someplace, please, so that we can come sit down with each other and meet each other and hear about each other's work? Because our cooperatives, our Black-led cooperatives, food co-ops, had been mostly organizing in isolation from one another. And so this became, for me, maybe the second space where I had an opportunity to organize with Black cooperators, right, around addressing issues of need and want for Black communities. And so year after year, I committed to attending the up-and-coming conference. I met Erin Dale McClellan, who is the executive director of the Partnership Fund and the Partnership Action Funds, and is also the board president for the Fertile Ground Food Co-op, which is a startup in Raleigh, North Carolina. And, you know, probably by like 2019, 2020, I think I kind of like started receiving messages about this thing that she was envisioning called the Collective Courage Fund, where she was really seeing an opportunity for Black-led grocery food cooperatives who are growing their membership bases, organizing people around how to democratically own and control this grocery store project, right? And to really think about what it means to build community wealth together. He was seeing that happening, and also knowing that there were these membership-based organizations that in her full-time job work, she was helping to organize in communities and states across the country to think about how they're building political power for their organizations.
Okay.
And she said, well, what would happen if our co-ops were also thinking about civic engagement as a way to build political power, right? Can they both build economic and independent political power at the same time?
And you said,
this was the question.
Yes.
And I said, yes, please. And she partnered with the National Black Food Injustice Alliance, an organization called Peace by Peace, to really start putting together a vision for what the Collective Courage Fund would be, to help address both the real material conditions and needs within Black communities, and to support organizing efforts that develop people, right, support membership growth, and utilize civic engagement strategies to build political power in their communities as well. And so the fund does that by moving money to Black-led and serving food and land-based cooperatives throughout the United States. It does it by providing support for cooperative education and training, as well as for training related to civic engagement activities. And it also does work to support philanthropy and funders in understanding why this need exists and how to support moving more resources into these communities for this work.
So I'm going to go back to up and coming and then come back
Okay.
up. I think my first time there was 2019. Okay. And I had the pleasure of meeting Malik out of the Detroit Food Co-op. And I guess there's one class I was in, there may have been 5 blacks and 20 whites. And this is all people that are trying to start a food co-op somewhere in the U.S. And I really like Deb Trocher, who is sort of the head person in this from the Indiana Cooperative Development Center. And Malik stood up and said, we want to have courses that are led by Black people for Black people. Mm-hmm. The courses at that time were mostly led by white folks, if not all of them. All of them that I went to were led by white people. And because of COVID, I didn't go until last year. Okay. It seemed like I've been 3 times, but okay. So I went last year, and I too, like you, was, oh, look at all these Black people. Look at that. And I just go around meeting people and talking to people and just excited. And I had a pleasure of leading a panel discussion with Malik, which was just fascinating and phenomenal. Mm-hmm. And they just opened their food co-op, the Food People's Co-op in Detroit on May 1st. And I had intended to go to their May 18th celebration. I got started, but got stuck in a major traffic jam by, I must have sat still for two and a half hours. So I ended up, I prayed, you like this. And as soon as I prayed, it started raining. Literally. As soon as I finished praying, I said, okay, God, okay, I'm going to turn around, go home. So I didn't make it up for that celebration, and I think I missed a good time and with good people. So to me, building economic wealth and political wealth, strength, power, they go hand in hand. Mm-hmm. It's awful hard, and I had to learn this because I didn't like politics. Because I didn't basically see us in it, and I didn't like what I saw politicians doing. Until a black man in a book that I was reading on real estate development said that politicians are people that come together to solve community problems. I said, oh no, that's co-ops. Okay. That's not the politicians I know, but that's a great definition. If politicians were people that came together to solve community problems, okay, then that would be phenomenal. And that's how I can see, I really like Aaron's idea of how do we get black cooperators to create political power, not economic power and political power. Okay, so tell us, how did you get the name Collective Courage?
Well, it is definitely in recognition of the work, as you've mentioned, of Dr. Jessica Gordon-Nembhard in her book, Collective Courage. Aaron asked her if we could call the fund the Collective Courage Fund. You know, I think about how inspirational that book has been to so many of, it's like, if you're a black cooperator, this book might be like your co-op Bible, right? It's a way that we get to return to the past. It's somewhat a Sankofa moment, right? Where we get to go and return to our past and carry the lessons from the past into our current work, right? There you go.
It's right here by my desk. And I do use it as a Bible. I found it difficult to read it as a fiction or a novel, but it's like
not that.
If I wanted to find out what are co-ops in Philadelphia, or what was that co-op in Bluefield, West Virginia, or W.E.B. Du Bois, and I just go and look up. Yeah. And I mean, Dr. Jessica also serves as a member of the governance committee for the Collective Courage Fund, so she's a close advisor to us, and has partnered with us since the very beginning to bring this into being. And also, I just want to go back for a second. I was in Detroit this weekend. It was beautiful. Last weekend for the grand opening. It was quite an experience. Were you there on the 1st or the 18th?
The 18th.
Okay,
the 19th.
That's when I wanted to be there. Yeah.
It was a powerful experience with many folks from black co-ops coming in from other cities from around the country to participate in that celebratory work. And then we organized some time to spend together too on Sunday, which was really powerful and good. And yeah, Baba Malik has been a critical organizer in this work. And early on, you know, after we found each other in that room, in that up and coming conference, he and I and others started organizing work to imagine like how we would stay together and how we could build a network amongst ourselves where we can share information, learn from each other, as well as bring in experts from the field to support our collective learning and growing. And so we started hosting monthly or bi-monthly Zoom calls that Black folks would participate in. The Food Co-op Initiative helped support organizing this work and getting the word out about it. And ultimately worked, Malik was then on the leadership team for the National Black Food and Justice Alliance. And the Alliance began to to hold that work. So to your point, we want Black folks leading and teaching Black folks. We organized a way to move this kind of leadership away from our beloved allies and co-conspirators in our white-led institutions and put it and center it in the hands of our Black leaders. And so that we worked that out, and we've been doing that and hosting Black-led Day and up and coming, for a few years now. But that was organizing work that Black people did, right? That leaders within white-led food co-op organizations supported and moved back so that we could move forward.
Yeah, that Black-led Day was awesome. And I went to every class that I could go to, every class I could fit in. And I told Deb the only problem I had was there's too many classes I wanted to go. I couldn't make them all.
Decisions.
Okay, so Collective Courage comes from the book Collective Courage, Your Name, A History of African American cooperative economic thought and practice. Now, you've already given a definition. I like a simpler definition that I use, that the co-ops are developed by its members for the benefit of its members. Okay. And you use democratic control. Blah, that's all true, but it's created by the membership for the benefit of the memberships. And that really works for me of what a co-op is. So how does this collective carriage fund work?
So,
can you give us a quick in 1 minute before we take the break?
Yeah, let's give the intro version. Is in 2022, we organized our first call for applications, where we had a governance committee who are people who had received funds or had expressed interest in working with the Collective Courage Fund to put together an application and say, hey, Black-led and serving food and land-based cooperatives, we have some general operating money for you if you are interested in this project of economic and independent political power building. We thought maybe we would get 15, 20 applications.
Okay, we're going to stop there.
60.
We're going to stop there, take our break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about some of those applications you got and how people could apply. We'll be right back. Please don't touch that dial. Welcome back, everybody. This is Vernon Oaks, and the program is Everything Co-op. And we have Miss Jamila Medley on with us today, and we're talking about Collective Carriage Fund. And we said when we come back, and I wanted to go right to it, Jamila, how would one apply for this fund?
So again, we're a new fund, so we're continuing to learn and adapt our processes. But right now, we do have applications open for an electoral justice awards, where we are inviting Black-led and serving food and land-based cooperatives who are planning to do civic engagement activity around and to impact the 2024 elections, to submit applications for some funding. Our outreach has been very word of mouth. Because of my work and my history, I've been able to just kind of put together an email, send it out to 200 people or so, and it has helped move. People have spread it, right? Have spread the word. So mostly, if people want information about how to apply, what eligibility requirements and stuff are, they should reach out to me directly, and I can provide my email address if that is at all of use.
Yeah, let's go. What is it?
Okay, it's Jamila, J-A-M as in Mary, I-L-A, at partnershipfunds.org.
Okay, so that's Jamila at partnershipfunds.org.
Yes.
Okay. Whew. Partnershipfunds.org. So if you want any information about applying for these funds for civic engagement, then email Jamila at partnershipfunds.org. That partnership funds is all one word. So Jamila, okay, you started talking before we went on the break that 21, 22, you had applications, and you had said something like we expected blank. What did you get how many applications did you get? How many?
Yeah, we ended up with 57 applications, which was significantly higher than we imagined, and also just blew our minds because, it was certainly food co-ops. It was also housing cooperatives, community trusts, real estate co-ops, agricultural co-ops, food distribution cooperatives, folks that are developing food products as cooperatives, farm-based cooperatives, agriculture-based cooperatives. It was, I think, especially for the governance committee members who are all Black people who are leaders in their food co-ops, right? Our food co-ops tend to be a little siloed from the broader cooperative movement. and what's happening with other sectors, right?
Okay.
When we think about energy, when we think of worker co-ops. So I think them even being able to see, like, there are all kinds of cooperative projects being imagined and created and sustained by Black people across the United States and across sectors, right? We are cooperating, we're doing this work. And because we got so many applications, I literally had to reimagine and rebuild our review process so that we could like take a little bit more time to handle all of those applications and get through them.
So how many grants did you offer that first year?
So that first round, we provided 8 cooperatives with $30,000 each. Our goal has been to move just under about $300,000 in 2022, 2023, and again in 2024. So we're also, actively, our leadership at the partnership funds is actively also looking to increase the pot of money that we can provide to our grantee partners and to the ecosystem. So that was our first round. We gave $30,000 to 8 cooperatives. Well, $30,000 each to 8 different cooperatives.
Okay. So your next round was 2023?
In 2023. So in 2023, we wanted to also invite co-ops because we know like there is no year that an election is not happening. There's always elections happening within our communities, right? I think we think of this kind of year, 2024, we got big presidential elections happening, but we're always contending with state and local elections, ballot initiatives, and other kinds of shifts that are happening within our communities that we need to be paying attention to. So in 2023, we created this opportunity called the Electoral Justice Awards, where we invited folks to apply for funding if they wanted to, use civic engagement strategies that would have an impact on the 2023 elections. And so we got some applications, a smaller pool for sure, but we were able to move about $120,000, I think, to 8 or 9 cooperative organizations that were actively engaged in the 2023 elections.
Okay. So $120,000 to those 8 co-ops. Mm-hmm. And I have it that those local elections can be more important than the presidential election.
Absolutely.
The county, the city, the state, mayors, governors, and we see a lot with attorney generals that are elected, like in Georgia, yesterday in primary, day before yesterday primary. Okay, so what does it look like for 2024?
So in 2024, we're currently, like as I mentioned, in the process of doing the Electoral Justice Awards rounds again. We know that in the late summer, we'll have another call for applications for general operating funds. We did that again we did it in 2023 as well, and moved money into an additional, I want to say 18 or 19 cooperatives. So the Collective Courage Fund now has about 30 partners as Black-led and serving food and land-based cooperatives around the country that we are actively funding at this time. So a lot of our work is really thinking about how do we deepen connections with these grantee partners and how do we get to know each other and support them in getting to know each other as well through supporting networks and ecosystem building. And it's also, we're focused on bringing in the cooperatives into the other work that the Partnership Fund is doing with existing power building organizations that are grassroots, multiracial, membership-based organizations that are working to build political power as well, and seeing how these cooperatives and these power building organizations move together. Like, what are the opportunities for them to move together? So we're exploring that. we're working to strengthen our governance. As I mentioned, who is making the decision about who receives this money? It's not staffers at some nonprofit or a foundation somewhere. It's your peers. If you're applying, it's people who are in the position that you are in, who are supporting the Collective Courage Fund and are choosing to show up in this way to support the review and distribution process for this work.
Okay. So can you give me some example, me and the audience, can you give me some examples of who you have given money to? What kind of projects have they done? Because this is 501c3 money, so we can't say, I want to elect one of the presidential candidates.
No, we can't say which one.
I started to say which one I'm supporting, but okay. So you can't provide money to go after a particular candidate. So what kinds of funding, what kind of projects?
Yeah, so we can look at one of the organizations that we supported was Gem City Market, right? In Dayton, Ohio.
Dayton, yeah.
Yes. And they have been actively, since even before they opened as a grocery co-op, really using opportunities to support ballot initiatives, right? To have wins for their communities. And so ballot initiatives are really, really important tools in the political process for when people actually have a direct, do you want this to happen? Yes or no? Do you want to see this change? Yes or no? And part of what can happen in this scenario is people are educating people about an issue that has an impact on their community, right? So when Gem City was organizing as a startup, for example, they were trying to decide if they wanted to sell alcohol in their store, right? Talk about members and what members want.
Okay.
Right? Some of them might want to have a glass of wine when they're buying and getting ingredients to make dinner, right? But there was a state prohibition for those grocery stores to be able to do that work. So that food co-op organized a ballot initiative to ask a question that went to the vote of their community members to have an exemption so that their store could have that, right? So that was one of the first big steps that community took toward thinking about how they can leverage their power as a membership base to get something that they wanted, right? And so we can see that happening across different kinds of issues. And that could be, for example, in Atlanta, Georgia, the community movement builders, we supported some of their work because they're in their efforts with trying to stop law enforcement training center that they are calling Cop City from coming into existence. So again, they're using this tool of a ballot initiative to organize people around how to show up and learn about that issue and make a choice for whether or not that's something they want in their community. We have, cooperators from Little Africa Food Co-op that have been focused on, at the state level, to advance agribusiness in their state, right? And to create legislation, to inspire and encourage their legislators to develop policies that are going to be accessible to neighborhood-based farms and provide training, right, for the next generation of farmers, right? So again, when we're seeing these hyper-local activities, it's the kind of things that are impacting our day-to-day lived experiences that we're talking about. How are we going to survive? What is the food? What are the conditions? And how do we teach and learn to create the things that we want to have and to sustain them in our communities?
That's wonderful. Now, where's Little Africa Food Co-op?
They are located in Cleveland, Ohio.
Okay. I've talked about them on the show, but I didn't remember where they were. I was going to put them in Jackson, Mississippi, but I didn't think that was right. Okay. Okay. So the initiative is one of the things that you can help support in your grants. If somebody has a particular initiative that they want, either in their food co-op or their housing co-op, and farm-based co-ops, all community.
Yeah.
Okay, land trust.
Yeah. And I will say, we want to also ensure that our co-ops are being able to get funding to do the things that they need to do, right? So with our general operating money, it's not project-based. It is funding available to these co-ops to do what it is that they need to do. So we're not funding programs, and we're thinking about how do we make and support our cooperatives in being whole, right? So these two rounds, one is definitely focused on like, what is the work you're doing to impact this upcoming election? And then the other cycle, sorry?
No, go ahead. The other cycle?
The other cycle is saying, have you made a commitment to investing in economic and independent political power building? And if so, you can express what that looks like for you. We have some funding available for you to apply as you need it within your cooperative.
So you mentioned the word whole, W-H-O-L-E, whole, like organization or whole individuals. What is that? What do you mean when you say a person is whole or the organization is whole?
Right. So I think in traditional philanthropy, there is an orientation to saying, like, we want to hear about a particular project that you're working on. We want to see what your project budget is, and we only want to fund that thing. You could be doing 3 other things, you know, like that's nice, but we only want to pay attention to this. The Partnership Fund has an approach where in order to do work, we have to support people. People need to be well to show up to work every day.
Yes.
People need to be well to show up and volunteer and commit their time, donate their time to work on a lot of these projects. People need opportunities to rest and to heal. They need space and time to strategize. They need to hire bookkeepers and administrative assistants, not only program directors, right? And so we want to be able to expand how we think about organizations and what it takes to succeed and be sustainable, to include all of these different kinds of things that are happening that are visible through the program work, but they're also invisible because it's what it takes to maintain and to run shop every day. And so when we say whole, it means that we're thinking about the whole person and how people are able to show up and what can we do to support them, whether it's in providing leadership development and support, providing funding so that people can say, hey, we didn't have it before, but now we have some money that we can pay you to take parental leave, right? And give you and make sure that you're going to have some money in your pocket because otherwise we wouldn't be able to do it, right? So really trying to expand the meaning of what it means to support organizations and being whole. It means thinking beyond the program. It means thinking about the organization as a whole and the people who make it up and making sure that they have what they need to show up every day.
So in every food co-op, they're going to have a gym. So when people take breaks, they can go and exercise. And there's a place for them to sit down and meditate because of that customer they had to deal with or whatever issue they had to deal with, vendor, customer, whatever. Okay, the whole person. And you make sure that they get good food, good nutritional foods. All right. Got it.
The whole organization.
Got it. Okay. So how many grants are you expecting to give out this year, 2024?
Yeah, that is a tricky question. I don't know what the governance committee is going to decide. I know that our first year, they decided to fund a smaller amount of cooperatives and give larger amounts. In 2023, particularly around the general operating funding, they decided to fund a lot more cooperatives and give smaller amounts of grants. So I'm not quite sure how the governing committee is going to decide that this year. Again, that's part of like being new, right? Is that we're still experimenting and exploring options. I think through each cycle as we are introduced to applicants, we continue to learn more about what the needs are. And I think over time we'll gain clarity around like the scope and scale of the projects that we want to fund. But right now, I think we're trying to still figure out at each iteration what's going to be the best way to leverage the resources that we have in support of the co-ops.
So co-ops have 7 principles: volunteer and open membership. First one, democratic member control, 1 member, 1 vote. Member economic participation. Normally there's a membership fee for a food co-op. It could be $100, $1,000. And if and when there's a surplus or profit, then members can get a dividend check or patronage. They must have autonomy and independence. And the 5th one, which I fell in love with first, Jamila, was education, training, and information. They get the education, training, and information that they need to run a successful business. And that's what happens at Up and Coming. And then there's cooperation among co-ops. And when you say a network or an ecosystem, that's what you're really talking about. How do people work together, share together, learn together, and accomplish together? And then there's concern for the community. With those 7 principles, do you see where these co-ops can really make headway in the political environment?
Yeah. I'm going to go some of my favorites too. I mean, I think, to your point that cooperatives are for members, right? Mm-hmm. To the benefit of their members. And I think that absolutely is true. And I think there's an and there, right? Because inherently, I believe that cooperatives should not and cannot be only concerned with their members, right? Because we do have the principle around concern for our community. Mm-hmm. And so it does mean that as we're considering what is good for the co-op, we have to be considering what is good for the ecosystem and the communities in which our cooperatives exist as well. So I think that what I think is also true of the experience of Black-led food co-op projects, right, is that this focus on building the store isn't just about the store. It's about creating a movement, right, mm-hmm. through which the store is a vehicle for change. And so they are certainly concerned about bringing people in to join the membership because we need those commitments. We need that equity. We need that buying power. We need that representation, right? And it is also true that those efforts are for whoever else exists in that community too, because we have to take care of each other. Nobody else is doing that for us, really, which is why this is happening in so many communities where corporate food systems have abandoned Black communities. And so their ability to say that we want to feed ourselves and we want to use the cooperative model as a tool to do that is about liberation, is about freeing ourselves from those existing systems mm-hmm. that don't really want to put into us, and us figuring out how we can invest in ourselves and invite others to support that effort alongside us. So I think there's this notion around concern of community is a big, significant priority in terms of how Black cooperators are thinking about and engaging with the cooperative principles. I also think that education and training is very important. And I think it's certainly about, like, here are the things that we do in our co-op that are specific to the work that we do. But I think a lot of our Black co-ops are also committed to political education, right? So examining the historical reasons for why the conditions exist that do exist in our communities, yes. to honor and lift up and teach about our elders and ancestors who have contributed to our struggles and helped us survive and helped us pursue the last generation of cooperatives that we had in our mm-hmm. communities, mm-hmm. right? And to also dream and imagine and envision together a future that we want. And to also connect that with goals, principles, strategies, and values that hold us together while we're working together. So I see those 2 principles around education and training. And yes, I entirely opened up the meaning of that, I think, beyond what we traditionally think of it, and concern for community as anchors for the work that Black-led co-ops are doing. in many ways.
Fantastic. So the short answer to my question is yes. Those principles will help with political power and really getting this one member, one vote, that voting is extremely important. When you talk about power, whether or not that's an initiative. We only have a few minutes left. What other kind of projects besides initiatives, ballot initiatives, have you funded or would you encourage?
Yeah, I think if there is, advocacy work is important. If there is an issue happening in your community and you want people to get educated about it, and you want to organize people to come to your state capitol to tell your legislators, hey, this issue means something to us, and you want to advocate for that issue, we invite you to submit an application so that we can support you in getting that bus, right? If you have, the opportunities to say to your members, hey, we want to remind you that this election is coming up on this date, and you need some capacity so that you can do a text messaging campaign to your member base, let us know, right?
Okay.
We can support you in that as well.
So go to Jamila at partnershipfunds.org to get more information and to apply for this money to help the community, to help the co-op and the people in the co-op and the people in the community. You have a message that you'd like to leave people with?
Just, we cooperate in so many ways. I'd like to think that cooperatives are a tool. Cooperation is a practice. So when we are cooperating in our cooperatives, let's remember that we're taking the how we do that, how we choose to be in relationship with one another into the wider world together, and informing and influencing how power shows up because we are cooperators and we do things in a specific way. And that can happen in our families, in our churches, in our PTAs. Bring cooperation with you.
Thank you. Everybody out there, bring cooperation with you, and we will see you next Thursday. Live cooperatively.
The preceding program was paid for by Everything Co-op.